I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion on this Monday morning, and a really wild week last week as we finished up the week. We had a lot of different news sources that were pushing things around in the markets themselves. One of them was we got the reports on the retail numbers. We knew they'd be bad. They were even worse. The problem was, on top of that, the Trump administration also really starting to buckle down and going after Huawei, and especially it was going to be affecting the semiconductor industry and the shipments. And that was going to be a real problem. And certainly it was, because that really started to lead a big cascade of the markets to the downside, only to watch these markets absolutely rebound once again to the upside. As a matter of fact, you look at the moves and you look at something like the NASDAQ, it actually rallied 200 points off of the lows. And then you look over at the Dow, rallied about 400 points off of the lows. Now, we didn't finish anything unbelievably strong, but really a very powerful move off of those lows, showing that there were still buyers out there buying on some of these various dips. And we look at the volatility index, we had a huge day in terms of volatility. We had a nice range from in the upper 35 area all the way down where we closed on the lows near 32. But there was a lot of different names that were really powering this recovery in the markets. And when you look at, for instance, different sectors, you look at the financials and energy as JP Morgan off of the lows, but still some pretty good pressure on the financials, energy, some of those areas. But consumers, the healthcare world, the materials world, those are the kinds of names that really started to power the markets. And you look at a J&J, you look at Amgen, you look at Walmart and Home Depot, those kind of names. As a matter of fact, when you look at the Dow itself, there were a couple of names that really did stand out in terms of what was really leading the markets in terms of the Dow off of those lower levels and just sort of that stair step higher and then moving into positive territory. And there's a variety of different names that really were contributing to that. But Home Depot, certainly one of those names, and a lot of different other names that were contributing as we had a pretty big, wide move back up to the upside off of those lows. And that was pretty amazing to watch as we got through the end of the day. Even some of the names that really were related to other areas of the marketplace that reacted late as well. So a lot of different things going on in terms of the markets getting into that close on Friday. But then you have that lead in to today. And the lead in today, we already were looking at a market that was actually gaining a couple of hundred points, but that couple of hundred points turned into about 700 points. I'm looking over at the screens right now. I see markets up about 700 points, maybe a little bit more, maybe even just a little bit less now. But those markets exploding to the upside. Why? Because the potential of vaccines, and the vaccine from Moderna, certainly something. Now, this is phase one, a lot of excitement, but a lot of folks have been waiting for some sort of positive news. And the amazing thing is the amount of money that's been sitting on the sidelines, as a matter of fact. And that's part of why when we get some of these moves, primarily to the upside, the amount of cash that's coming in from those that have been watching and waiting, and that FOMO, that fear of missing out, playing a big part and a big role in why you see a day like today where we're seeing a very explosive move off of a news source that is very positive, but it's still very, very early in the process. So interesting to watch this whole thing. As a matter of fact, volatility, I'd almost expect volatility to be even lower given this big move and some of the excitement right now, but we're still hanging around 28s, 29s in that sort of a range with the volatility index. So still a lot of concern in the marketplace, rightfully so. Makes a lot of sense right now. I think oil, certainly, and energy, that space, not always working together, but today they are. As a matter of fact, you look at the energy space, many of those names really exploding to the upside as you watch the price of oil up about 10% today. So a nice solid move there as well. As a matter of fact, you look at the XLE, it's up about 7% right now. And then I look across, you're always looking to see, okay, well, what is the foundation of what we're looking at? We've got a nice broad participation today. I'll give you an example. So energy, yes, that's a standout, but financials, that's up about 4%. Good to see financials actually participating. Materials up about 4.5%. Industrials, 4.5%. You get the idea. The area that we might see a little bit of a lag right now, I would say certainly is in the NASDAQ, which is still very strong, up about 2%, give or take. You got certain names that are moving to the downside. You've got Zoom and Electronic Arts and some of these names that have been explosive to the upside. Those are off about 2% very early in the trading session. But the Dow, we are seeing explosive moves out of Dow itself, we're seeing Disney, we're seeing Boeing, a lot of various names really exploding right now in terms of what's really powering this 700-point move or thereabouts in the marketplace. And it is very, very strong. We've got an incredible amount of unusual option activity that's already hitting on the systems. We're barely 40 minutes into the trading day, and we're already seeing an enormous amount. I'm going to give you one right now. So we're looking at one of the names that we were talking about powering the Dow right now is Boeing. Now, this is a very volatile name. We all know that. There's activity every single day, some positive, some negative, all that type of thing. But right now, with the markets moving to the upside, Boeing moving to the upside, Boeing having some pretty interesting option activity. But if you slide over into another one of the names, and we talk about various names that seem to go in and out of favor oftentimes, and last week or so ago, you couldn't even find buyers of Disney. It was trading around $100 a share. Everybody's saying, hey, they can't do this. It was $50 off of the highs. It was $50, so 1/3 chopped off of the stock. Well, now you're looking at a stock that today trading about 116.5. I just wonder how many people suddenly are bullish on a name like this. The interesting part, though, is that all of the knowns were already in place when the stock was trading around 100. We knew the parks were closed. We knew it was going to be a very slow opening, but we also knew that there was some hope as we watched over into the Asian markets as they opened up some of the parks, the European markets as they are scheduled to reopen the parks. We already knew the streaming and how great that's been. But so there's a lot of news that was already there. So piecing that all together, and you can see now suddenly this big move because fear of missing out, once again, pushing stocks around. So Disney trading at about a 116.5. We had a nice, good size buyer early on, about 4,000 of this week's expiring, staying with the theme of everything very, very short term. This week's expiring 120 calls. So they're just out of the money. So those are only trading for about 80 cents or so. So pretty nice buying. Stock trading 116.5 when these were purchased. Stocks are moving all over the place, folks. So depending on when you're seeing this, you'll have to take note of where the stocks were. So that's where I'm pointing it out. It was trading 116.5. These are trading around 80 cents for these 120 strike calls. That's one of the unusual option activity. Doesn't mean they're going to be right, but it just shows you that there is the turn. There's that turn in momentum and what people are looking for out of certain names, what names might lead, what names that maybe were out of favor are back in favor, maybe to some degree. So that's a lot of what we're seeing right now. And the amount of unusual option activity across the board. I mentioned there's names like Boeing sticking out to me right now. Disney's certainly sticking out. All kinds of different names, even in the retail space and the cruise space, all standing out right now. But this one I thought was one of the more interesting ones just based upon how much negativity we had seen around the Disney name and the stock price itself. And now suddenly it seems like we're starting to see a lot more bulls kind of come out. We talk about windsocks all the time. It's pretty interesting. You have to understand the options world. You've got to have a grasp of what's going on there. Folks, this is the area where you're seeing growth. We've got great educators here at Market Rebellion. I would encourage you to check that out. Have a great day of trading. I'm excited about the day. I'll see you on the halftime report. Hopefully we've got even more unusual option activity. I think we got a couple that I can pick from right now. Have a great day.